Hi, and welcome to a Java tutorial where I'll be explaining how to implement an object of SwingTimer into a GUI, whilst also including it with an action listener and an action event. Firstly, we need to create the GUI for our timer to display into, and then a new method to house our SwingTimer whilst also declaring our variables. However, an additional feature of our method will include passing data into our parameters. This will be passed when the method is called. Including this will allow us to determine how long our timer runs within the called method. This would be particularly useful if you wanted numerous timers within various counting lengths. Example, a timer set up for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, etc. etc. Only means you have to write the code for timer once, and then when we're calling the method, input how long we want it to run for. So now we know what our timer is going to do, let's go and set up our variables and create our new method. So the first thing we need to do is import timer. So to do this, at the top of your document, we need to write import javax.swing.Timer, capital T, semicolon. And that imports the timer library. Next, we need to go and set timer up as an object. So, timer stopwatch. So now timer is set up within the variable stopwatch. Next, we can set up other variables, so we will need a count variable. We'll also need a variable to initiate the delay between each count. So let's call it delay. Now delay will be measured in milliseconds. So each time the count is executed, it refers to the delay to see how often it should execute it, being every 1000 milliseconds being 1 second. So now we have a variable set up. Let's go and create the method. Now, as you can see here, I've set up a parameter inside our method. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be passing in data to determine how long the count or timer runs for. So later on, I will associate the countPassed to count. So then data passed in as countPassed gets turned into count and then sets the duration of the method. But we'll come to that a bit later. So next, we need to actually start our action listener. So to do this, there's two ways you can go about it. You can import ActionListener first, or in my case, you can write the context to ActionListener, then fix it by right-clicking and fix import, and it brings it in for you. So, as the following. So as you can see, it redlines. So if you right-click it, fix imports, you can see at the top of the page now where my imports are, it's brought in the new action listener. So the action listener requires an action event, an actual task to do. So inside the action listener method, we're now going to create a new method called ActionEvent, actionPerformed. And inside the parameters of actionPerformed, it's going to have ActionEvent. And as you can see, it's redlined still. So right click it, fix imports, yes, and they both go away. Now at the end of each action listener on the curly bracket, it will also need a semicolon to end the statement. So on the curly bracket, which is a red line, semicolon, and that fixes that for you. So now we need to set a task for the action event. So all I've done is create an if statement which is count being 0 equal to 0 and initiates it. So if count is equal to 0, it stops the stopwatch and displays in the timer you're out of time. So let's include an else for the rest of it. So if counter is equal to 0, stop. Else, so when it isn't equal to, it's going to do something else. So for this, we're going to have great. So in our else statement, we have the lblTimer.setText you have plus the count being how many seconds remaining, and then seconds remaining, and then count decrementing. So all that we'll be doing is each time count is displayed for the action event, it will decrement it, meaning -1. So if the count is 5, once the action's performed, it'll take down 1, meaning it's 4, so on and so forth until this if statement is true, at which the stopwatch stops and it sets you're out of time. So now we have our task set up. We need to link the action listener. So in other words, we need to call it. So we're going to link hours to the stopwatch. So after the semicolon and the curly bracket, inside the method itself, so make sure your curly bracket of the opening is there and the closing is just there. You need to write the name of your timer. So mine, stopwatch equals new timer delay action, followed by semicolon. So all it's doing here, it's creating a new version of the object, stopwatch equals new timer, and inside the argument it's setting up delay as 1000 milliseconds, and then the action simply being action listener there, so it invokes both those two clauses. So once we've done that, we will also write so that method sets up the initial delay of timer, meaning there is no wait time when the action is performed. So as soon as the action is true and it's performed, it sets the initial delay to 0, immediately responding and performing the task. At this point, you could set the initial delay to 5000 milliseconds, meaning there'll be an initial delay of 5 seconds. In our case, we don't want an initial delay, so we're putting it as 0. Finally, we will link our data passed into the parameter by making it equal to our counting time. So simply as you can see here, inside the parameters we originally set up countPassed. So any input we're calling into the method on initiation, we pass into countPassed. It will run through the program and find that count equal to countPassed. So any value set as countPassed will be set up as count, and in turn, count goes through the entire program determining how long it runs for. So if we pass in a variable being 60 seconds into countPassed, it will later on equal count, and then meaning the rest of the program runs for 60 seconds, as that is the value countPassed was set up as. So now to test our new start timer, all you'll need to do is create yourself a simple GUI. So if I go to the design view, as you can see here, I've created a very simple GUI which includes a button, which will be our initiator for the event, and a label which will display the timer. So once you've created up your GUI, which consists of a panel, timer, and a label. Rename all the variables and make sure they reflect the method you previously created. Once you've done that, go into the button, double click it to actually go through to the actual action event, and it should pass you through to the source design like so. And inside here we're going to call this new method we've created called startTimer. So to call the method, all we do is startTimer curly brackets. Now, as you can see, if you just leave it as that with a semicolon end, it comes up redlining as it's expecting data to pass through, as that's how it's set up initially. So in the brackets here, we're going to type in how long we want the program to run for. So I want mine to count for 10 seconds. So I'll type in 10 and the red line disappears. So now let's save the document and see if it works. So if we fire up the GUI, see if it works. As you can see here, mine doesn't. Now the simple reason for that is because we haven't initiated startTimer. So move back to your source code. At the bottom where you put count equals countPassed, passing the data, just before that, simply type in your timer, so mine's called stopwatch.start method. Now, when we click it, it should invoke the method and get it to start. Save and rerun. And there we go. It's counting down. And displays the end result being you're out of time. So that concludes how to utilize SwingTimer by using an action event and action listener inside a GUI on a button performed task. I hope I've been as thorough as possible and explained everything you need to know. Until next time, goodbye.